All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Health Transformation webinar. I am your host, Cade Archibald, and you guys are in for a really, really amazing treat today. We're going to be jumping into some really cool stuff, is looking at the body as a whole from a central versus a peripheral perspective, and looking at some really cool stuff. Even you'll get a glimpse into Reagan's newest book that he's writing. He's working through chapter 1. Some amazing stuff on reversing aging and some of the effects of aging as we get older and some of those things. So some great stuff coming down the pipeline there. But today we're going to be doing some really cool stuff, learning about the body. So Reagan, I'm excited about. I'm just as excited as everyone else on here. So, what do we got in store today?
Awesome. Well, today's going to be really exciting. We've been putting together a whole. I've been writing a new book, and sorry, I'm going to try and get this a little closer to the board. And I want to get your insights on it. So, what you guys are going to see from me very soon is an email. And the email is going to have chapter 1. And then if you want to be involved, the email will first, click on the link and then you can read chapter 1. But this is, it's just chapter 1 in its rough form. So I want your insights because this is a book that I'm writing for you guys. It's not a book for me. I feel like I've got a message that needs to get out. And so that's why I'm writing the book. But I also want to make sure that I'm creating some clarity around what you guys are looking for. So if you guys don't mind, let's go through some of the chapters of the book, and then I'm going to talk about some of the key concepts that I think will be the next breakthrough in healthcare and in medicine. But and I don't quite have a name for the book yet. It might be like Your Health Independence, but I don't really know what the name is quite yet. But chapter 1 is going to be your breakthrough strategies to end aging. So I know a lot of us would love to end aging if we could. Chapter 2 is called The Healthy 120-Year-Old Brain. So no sense in ending aging if we don't fix the brain along with it. Chapter 3 is the abundance and scarcity cycles in health, and then how to avoid the pitfalls. I think that chapter is probably the most fascinating because a lot of us, our health, we fall into this pattern, this downward spiral where we feel like there is nothing we can do about our health. Chapter 4 is going to be habits for exponential energy. And then chapter 5 is going to be the pathway to health independence. So really, there's some interesting things that I'm bringing up here, some interesting conversations. If we look at chapter 1, we have a whole game plan for ending aging. Now, there's a lot of groups out there who are talking about this, but I find that there's some key components to ending aging. And so in chapter 1, I'll kind of go through some of these with you today. But first of all is choosing how long do you want to live and choosing when you want to die. Because I've taken you guys through this exercise on several occasions, but imagine yourself that you choose an age that you want to live to, and maybe that's like 120. And you're like, man, 120, that's a stretch. And you get to 119 and you feel just as good as you do today. You have just the same amount of energy. You've got great relationships. You've got all the financial resources you need. What would keep you from wanting to live maybe another, how many years? 5, 10, 20 years, right? And so if you think about that is the reality that will be presented to many of us in the future. But the only ones who will actually be able to make a choice, yes, I want to live that long, are the people who actually have taken care of their health starting right now. So what we want to look at is the very first thing is when you're choosing when you want to die, the first thing that's going to motivate you is what makes your life unique. What makes you tick? What brings out the good in other people because of you being around? And so I think it's really important that as you look at this, you look at the central piece of your life, and that's something we're going to talk about today, which is what's at your core and what do you want to accomplish? And so a lot of times in health, there's this root cause. Can you see okay there?
Yeah, perfect.
So you have this core, this central piece, and this is you. And then you with a capital Y. So what makes up you is all these most interesting pieces, and maybe black will show up better, but the interesting pieces are, your personality, how you relate to other people, how driven you are. This can be, some of your passions in life. What are you motivated on the external? This is also where you look on the internal view and your spirituality and, how that relates. And then you start taking all these things, like you look at your diagnosis and do you have disease patterns? And then you start looking and you say, okay, well, what's your mindset like? And then you take this and you say, okay, what are the lifestyles that you need to incorporate to really be the best version of you? And so what happens is, a lot of us, we take one of these pieces and we get fragmented. And in health, especially in health, when we're talking about anti-aging, there's the one piece that ends up sticking around when everything else is gone, and that's our diagnosis. And so the diagnosis that we receive, whether that's a diagnosis of cancer, heart disease, diabetes. I met with a COPD patient yesterday who's, had a very severe diagnosis, but it's that diagnosis that pulls us away from the central piece of who we are. And so what we want to do, if we're looking at ending aging, is we want to say, well, what's at the center of this diagnosis? And then what's at the center of you? And so this is where we draw it in and we say, okay, well, at the center, how are your hormones? Are your hormones balanced? How about your gut and your biome? Is your gut and your biome, is that balanced? And then you take it down another notch and you say, okay, well, what's your brain health like? And this includes your neurotransmitters and your brain waves and your stress levels. That becomes a really important, critical piece. And then you have to look at your nutrition. Are you eating the right foods? And then you basically take this central piece, and instead of having a diagnosis that defines you, then you start eliminating that diagnosis and you start creating a strategy. So with hormones, you create a strategy. With your gut, you create another strategy. With your brain, you create another strategy. With nutrition, you create another strategy. And then what happens with these strategies is they're all built around addressing the overall cause. This is just focused on symptoms, right? This you focus on the cause. And so the only way that we can really end aging is if we're always looking at getting away from the central diagnosis that defines who we are, is what eliminates a lot of us in life. I mean, it's kind of like playing a game and you get a diagnosis and then you just believe because of that diagnosis you lost the game. It's like your coach meeting with the team at halftime and saying, hey guys, we're down by 20 points. There's no way you're going to win this game. I just want you to throw in the towel. And so I see so many patients who they've been living with that mindset for years, and the diagnosis is now what defined them from being who they are, and they've fallen away from the center of who they really are. I mean, they have so many extraordinary gifts, but the coach told them that they've lost the game, and so they believe it. So one of the things that the book addresses is how to get back to the center, where we're actually looking at the cause, not just the symptoms. Because if you can start looking at the cause right now, you'll create a lifestyle that's going to lead you to much better health and a much bigger potential for living a long, super long, robust life. So what do you think about that, Cade?
I love it. Yeah, and I think if your analogy of halftime, you're down 20, yeah, I think it's perfect. The only thing I'd add to that is, what happens is coach says, all right, well, let's just maintain being down 20. Maybe we can get to down by 15 by, suppressing some of those symptoms.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. That's the treatment that comes in. Yep. Cool. So the next stage is, here's how you can, here's some of the mindsets that's necessary. So there's a few things in our life that can be really fun. So, Kate, what's your favorite convenience in life right now?
My favorite convenience,
Like running water, electricity. I mean, the basics. Let's think about maybe something a little beyond that. But what would you say your favorite convenience is?
access to good food.
Access to good food. Yep. And how often do you like to have access to good food?
At least like 20 hours a day. No.
Yeah, at least all the time, right?
Yeah.
So,
No. Let's say we talked about time restricted eating last week, so I should probably say 8 hours, 10 hours a day, right?
yeah, I mean, that's good. You got an A for the class. Congratulations. No, I mean, if you think about the conveniences that we have, so there's this thing. There's this thing that we all want to avoid. We're all trying to move away from pain or move towards pleasure. And so we built this society that's based around these very simple conveniences. And some of those simple conveniences are like, we do have access to food 24 hours a day. And even good food, you can have access to it literally all day long. We have access to running water, to cell phones, to all the information that we could ever imagine is right here in our computers or on our smartphone in our pocket, or wherever it may be. So if you're looking at this, I use the analogy of we have to get out of this stage of thinking that our life needs to be everything needs to be smooth, and we have to have all the conveniences to us. And I introduced this concept right out of the gates called hormesis. Okay, do you remember what hormesis means?
So that is getting out of homeostasis, so ultimately, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So it's basically where you're pushing yourself in a certain direction where you're applying a little bit of stress. So hormesis is stress that's self-inflicted. And so some people would say, what? So you mentioned one of the self-inflicted stresses, one of the hormetic properties, which is time-restricted eating, right? So time-restricted eating.
Yeah.
What kind of stress does that put on you?
The lack of food, so hunger.
Yeah, so you're hungry for a couple hours a day. You're like, man, I really would love to eat, but I've committed myself to this 8-hour window where I'm eating food. So hormesis is one of the big things. Another stress, so I'll write some of these down. So time-restricted eating, TRE. Another thing is like a cold shower. Why a cold shower? Well, if you can take 30 of those Wim Hof breaths in the cold shower. Have you tried that yet, Kate?
Yeah. Since I listened to that podcast, I've been doing that every morning I can remember, which has been rad.
Yeah, so it's basically where you finish your washing and doing everything you can. The shower goes all the way cold, and this means all the way. And then you just do 30 deep breaths. So I'll do like 5 breaths and then turn, and then 5 and then turn and turn. And it's a great way to get your epinephrine going, strengthens your immune system. I notice that it clears my sinuses, clears my brain. I mean, everything is better with a cold shower, but it's hormesis. So hormesis is when you put your body through like temperature variations. You can go sit in a sauna and you can sweat. You can go to a hot yoga class. Those are some hormetic things that you can do to really induce better healing so that you live a long time. So one of the things we have to avoid is getting in this convenience trap, this trap where we don't want any discomfort in our life. Now remember, we don't want you to have pain. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm trying to help you avoid pain by putting some good stresses in your life. So exercise, that's a hormetic property. Another hormetic property is meditation. It's not easy to sit there and just try and keep your brain as still as possible. So these are some of the things that are addressed in the first chapter. I talk about some of the oldest people I know. I talk about Grandma Archibald, Kate Birla, in the book. I think she'll like that. But our grandma, is she 84, 85 now?
She is 86, I believe.
86. Holy cow. So our grandma Birla is 86, and she lives on a big old farm, and she wakes up every morning. She does her chores. She does her work. Her house is always clean. She's always working on, what do you think, at least 6 different furniture projects? Um, I mean, you go into her garage and she's just got shop is covered with furniture that she remodels. I mean, it's amazing. But our grandma Verla is someone who is at 86, she's not slowing down. I talk about my wife's grandmother, Grandma Wilson, who is 100. And some of the things that they don't look at life as everyone should hand things to me. There's no entitlement factor. That's what I've noticed with people who live a long time. Their mindset is, I got this. I'm going to handle it. My body can take care of it. My mind can take care of it. So yeah, Hormesis helps get us there. If you look at there's these trees on the Kohala Coast in Kona, and the wind in Kona, the trade winds just blow super hard. And those trees are all like twisted, and they're basically bent to the direction of the wind that's been blowing for years every day. And those trees are incredibly resilient. I mean, they've been there for decades, and it's not like they just decided, well, we got planted here, we're just going to die because it's too much stress. They have no idea how good it is just down the mountain where there's not much wind. There's just gentle breezes instead of that high mountain wind from the ocean. So yeah, they've practiced this art of hormesis. And so one of the things that we've heard is living every day as if it's your last. This is great advice, but also live as if you'll live forever is equally as compelling. So imagine that you had, okay, so today's your last day. What do you want to do to make today just amazing? Well, there's probably some obligations that you'd get rid of right now, and you'd probably make a lot of people really frustrated. But imagine that you're living every day as if you're creating a bigger future, and every day as you're living as if you're living forever, then you're going to want to engage in more exciting activities. You're going to want to meet new people. You're going to want to go and travel and experience those things you've always wanted to do. You may be willing to take on some more risks. But I think if you're planning on living forever, you also see that, well, there's this one thing that could stop me from wanting to move forward in my life, and that's my health. And so that's where you really have to focus in on it. So hormesis is one of those main properties that we kick the book off. And then we jump into some of the people who have inspired me besides my grandmother. I talk about Dan Sullivan. And now is the real kicker, which is aging is the #1 disease. So you guys, Kate, do you remember how many people die every day from aging?
It's 168,000. Is that right?
Yeah, that's how many people die every day. Is around 180,000, but 100,000 of those die just from aging.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's like degeneration.
And that's the nation, or that's the world?
World. Yeah, world. That's a lot of deaths. I mean, 180,000 deaths every day. 80,000 of those are from accidents. They're from diseases. They're from, some of the unavoidable things that happen in life. But 100,000 of those are from aging. And so we look at that and we say, well, that could be something that we could prevent. And this is what a lot of researchers are looking at, is how can we end this death process for 100,000 people? And this becomes the #1 problem right now. If you really believe that humans are a valuable resource, hopefully all of you do. If you believe that the planet's got plenty to take care of everybody, there's plenty of abundance to go around. The #1 issue is that there's 100,000 people dying every day from this thing we call aging. And so what I look at is I say, okay, well, how can we work at it on our own to actually start combating this big thing? And so that's one of the things I write about. Is the very first thing we have to figure out is you are an incredible asset to humanity. So that's the very first thing. #1 is you matter. And I don't want to sound cheesy. I don't want to sound like I'm giving you a pep rally, but you've got to realize that you have gifts to offer. You've got this uniqueness inside of you. And if you die, then we all struggle. We all suffer with that. We want you to be around. The second thing that we talk about is the fact that you need to, if you want to avoid death, then you have to avoid like major traumas, or you have to avoid like getting killed. So one of my patients that I write about, Kate, did I ever tell you about my patient who got hit by the well of at the tail of a well? She was
No.
Yeah, her name's Janet, and she would not mind me sharing this with all of you because she's written about it, and Janet may even actually listen to this. But Janet was with a group of people outside of the Dominica and the Republic of Dominica on the island, and they were all around this mother well and her calf. And for some reason, those guys, when they were scuba diving, they made a circle around the well. They didn't mean to; it was unintentional, but they all wanted to get like this open view. And the mother well got spooked, and just as the mother well turned, her tail went and hit my patient Janet, and she went about 200 feet down in the ocean. I mean, you can imagine. I don't know how much wells weigh. I can't remember, but they're pretty beastly animals. I mean, they're the size of a big old 3-story building. And so she went about 200 feet down and just was tumbling. And her daughter saw her go down into the water. And so her daughter brought her to the surface, and they did CRP. They revived her. And then she came, once she got back into the States, she was getting a bunch of medical care, but she showed up at my clinic and she had bruises everywhere. I mean, I'd never seen a body so black and blue. It was the craziest thing I'd ever seen, but it almost killed her. So one of the morals of the story is if you want to live to be a long time, live a long time, then you can't get killed. Like you may want to make some better choices. If you're going to cross the street, don't get hit by a bus, right? So those are some common things, and so just to get you out of that. So the other thing that we talk about is finding out what your assets are to humankind. And so not only do you inspire a lot of people, and people depend on you, but the other thing is you've got a lot of creativity and a lot of value you can add to this cool thing that we call life. So I think that's a pretty good way. I kind of shift gears in a minute and talk about daily rituals to hang your hat on, brain makeover with cellular medicine. So, but I think that's a pretty good place to stop today. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. That little glimpse into a really cool book that's just coming together nicely. But yeah, any questions from anyone or anything you want to add to that, Kate?
No questions coming through the line at this point, but yeah, that was great.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week.
Have a great one.